Lesson 8.5 is going to take a look at harvest flow 3, and this is the harvest scenario with the most detail, with the most effort and the most steps. And so a layout here, and we talked about the setup in the beginning, and here you can see we've got our tray ready to be cut. We've got our initial rinse bin here with water ready to go. Our bin here with water ready to go. It's probably still filling up because I see it's not all the way to the top. We've got our supplies ready for picking hulls. We've got our drainage bin here and then leading into the spinner. And the crop we're about to do here is buckwheat. So we definitely need the hull picking because this is probably going to go as a microgreens crop and not a juicing crop, which means we need to take the hulls out. So it is a bit of a tedious process, but it's really required for crops like buckwheat and sunflower, where you can't really leave the hull in the product. It is a very, very unpleasant thing to bite into. The buckwheat especially, which can be quite sharp. Now, ideally in this process, you would have 4 people. You would have one person whose main job is cutting. You would have 2 people picking hulls, and you would have a person here doing the spinner and the packaging. And the way the flow usually works, especially when you've got many, many trays to harvest, is if there's a bottleneck somewhere, people can shift. So if the bottleneck happens to be in packing, then the cutter can move over to packing and do some packing. If the bottleneck is in hull picking, then either the cutter or the packer move into hull picking. So there's a lot of flexibility in this system. And one place where you rarely see the bottleneck, if ever, is in cutting because it's very quick. And so because a person can sort of cut a tray and then get into the flow of things and do other tasks, this kind of goes back to this idea of it almost doesn't matter in many situations how quickly you cut a tray. And so the benefit of an automated harvester really is going to be limited in a situation like this. So you would have to adjust the system a little bit in order to make that an automatic harvester be of the most use to you. So here we can see once things have been cut, and this is a sunflower crop, we're using our tools to start picking things out of the bin there, and then as the hulls get cleared out, we can transfer all this material into the drainage bin to be prepared for spinning. So I will post some future videos and some supplementary videos here to complement this. What I do have to take a look at, which is a little bit intense, but we'll try to keep the volume down on it, is, so this is a 2-person system. So this is me and one other person doing a sunflower harvest. Now, as I mentioned, 4 people is ideal. In this situation, I think we were short on people, so there was just 2 of us available to do it. These are definitely cooler conditions, as indicated by our toques. And so there was a little bit of flexibility here in the time that the product could spend in the drainage bin in the spinner. So let's take a look at this to get a sense of what this flow looks like with 2 people and how we shift around in our different roles. So you can see one of us is essentially picking hulls and one of us is essentially cutting. So at a certain point, hull picking is going to become the bottleneck. So here we go. I've shifted over. I'm doing a little bit of packing. Bringing out a few more trays. And really, the flow is actually working pretty good at this point. Often, I think in a few cases here, the product spent a little too much time in the water. And then here we see the cutter moving over to picking hulls to fill that space. So you can see we're moving around quite a bit. And you could really see the advantage that another person would bring in here in terms of getting stuff out of the water quicker and getting things packed a lot more. And then 2 people would move this along very quickly. So even with a system that's more elaborate like this, you can see that 2 people can do it fairly efficiently, but 4 people can make it happen very quickly. Where we really start to see differences is when we need to change the water. And so it really slows things down with 2 people, whereas 4 people can still keep the process moving along very, very good. So a few things to consider with this harvest and why we use it. So as I mentioned before, we're using this for microgreens with hulls. And sunflower and buckwheat are two of the main ones where you see this with. And with sunflower, another part of this process is the cold water dip actually makes a really, really big difference in its storage ability. And if you were to cut sunflower, if it had no hulls on it, and cut it and package it right away and get it into a fridge, it doesn't keep as long. In fact, it has a very, very short shelf life. So this is something we do for sunflower because it not only helps us more easily remove the hulls, but it actually extends its shelf life significantly and can go from, a shelf life of 4 days when we start to see browning and decomposition to close to 2 weeks before that really, really starts to make a difference. So it's very important for that. Key point here is minimizing the time that the microgreens spend in the water bath. And I talked about this with the radish. You've got about 2 or 3 minutes max, especially in really, really warm weather where the water might be cold, but the air is really warm. And so stuff sitting on the top is kind of in this weird mixed zone of warm and cold. Really, there's no need. Because the product is so small, once it's been put into the bath, the cooling has taken place. So if you can get stuff out quicker and get hulls removed, you're going to get a much better product in that regard. You want to move quickly, but you really, really need to avoid damage. And with sunflower, you can get kinks in the stem and kinks in the leaves. And not only do these things shorten its shelf life, but it also just aesthetically doesn't look as good. So you do learn to handle them better. And a lot of that is actually when you're transferring from one part to another. So from the initial rinse to the secondary rinse to the drainage bin into the spinner into packaging. So you can see you're handling the product many, many times. And as I mentioned earlier, the more you handle a product, the more likely you are to damage it and the shorter its life is going to be. So really, really be careful to handle things gently. Over time, you're going to be able to handle things gently, but very quickly as well. You're just going to learn the technique. So keep that in mind. So that's a look at that harvest flow 3. I think you can contrast that with the other harvest flows in terms of the amount of effort it takes and the amount of labor it's going to take. It is required for some crops. So make sure your setup is really good for this so you can do it as efficiently as possible, because it really is the most labor intensive part of the harvest process is when you're picking hulls from a product.